Good morning, students. Today we are going to discuss about module number 1, that is basic concepts. Here we are discussing about that concept of source transformation and source shifting. So let us discuss about that source transformation and source shifting concept. To discuss about that source transformation and source shifting concept, let us consider a simple voltage source. So the figure what I am showing here, a voltage source Vs whose polarities are plus and minus. It is that rise of potential voltage source with respect from terminal B to terminal A, and a resistor R which is connected in series with the source voltage Vs, that is called the internal resistance of the source. So every voltage source, every ideal voltage source don't have any internal resistance which is connected in series. For an ideal voltage source, the internal resistance which is connected in series with this voltage source, that R value equal to 0. Only internal resistance was offered for practical voltage sources. So the figure what you are seeing here, it is a practical voltage source which is represented Vs, and plus and minus are the polarities for this practical voltage source, and R is the internal resistance of this practical voltage source across the terminals AB. Now I am going to convert this voltage source into current source. Before going to discuss or before going to convert about the available voltage source into current source, let me tell why we have to convert first of all the voltage source into current source. Because while we are finding some unknown responses like voltage, current, power, it is difficult with the known source sometimes. There is a need to convert this voltage source into current source as per our demand or as per our requirement. During that case, here we are converting this voltage source into current source. So now I want to convert the available voltage source into current source. How it is possible to convert that available voltage source into current source? The available voltage source is converted into current source with the formula like Is. As we know the formula, Is is equal to Vs divided by R. If we know the formula Is is equal to Vs divided by R here, okay na? Then here the source voltage value here Vs, the internal resistance of the source is R, but I want to convert that available voltage source Vs into current source. If I want to convert available voltage source Vs into current source, then we have the formula, that is 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 equal Vs by R. So where Vs here, this voltage source Vs and this internal resistance R, if I am going do that, the ratio of Vs divided by and R, I may get Is, that is this value. And what about the internal resistance of the current source? The internal resistance of the current source is also equal to that the internal resistance of the voltage source. But the way how we are placing that internal resistance for voltage source and for current source is only differed at here. Let me check that how it is differed for voltage source and for current source. For suppose if you see that current source, the current source having that internal resistance which is connected in parallel across this Is. But coming to the voltage source where the internal resistance R is connected in series with this voltage source of Vs. This is the only one way how we are shifting that voltage source into current source and current source into voltage source. So this is the case where we are discussed for both independent voltage source and independent current source. Let me discuss the same concept how it is for dependent sources. So let us consider a dependent voltage source Vs whose internal resistance is R at here. Now if the internal resistance R is here and the source voltage is Vs and it is a dependent voltage source which is represented in diamond shape symbol with the polarities of plus and minus here. Here I am going to convert this dependent voltage source into dependent current source. How it is possible to convert the dependent voltage source into dependent current source? So it's possible only with the following formula, as we can convert that available dependent voltage source into current source. That means we know the formula Is is equal Vs by R. Here where is Vs? While we are finding that Is value, that is dependent current source Is value, we need Vs. This Vs here we are getting from this dependent voltage source Vs and its resistance. The ratio of dependent voltage source Vs and its resistance is the dependent current source value, which is equal to Is. So now we are converted the independent voltage source into independent current source. Let me convert again the independent current source into voltage source. How we can convert the independent current source into voltage source? Let us look at that the circuit what they given here. In this circuit here we know that independent current source value Is and its internal resistance R. I want to convert this Is into Vs. What is the formula from Ohm's law? We know the formula from Ohm's law. Vs is equal Is into R. Here already we know the value of Is. Already we know the internal resistance of this Is is R. By multiplying this Is and the internal resistance of this current source, here we can calculate this Vs. And how we shift that internal resistance of current source to internal resistance of voltage source? The internal resistance of current source, that is R, is shifted to internal resistance of voltage source, that is R. Here R value, here R value, both are same, but the way only it is differed, how it is connected to that source, to that independent voltage source and to that independent current source. That is, it is connected, here it is connected in series, that is independent voltage source and its internal resistance. Here it is connected in parallel to the independent current source and its internal resistance. So let us discuss the same concept, how it is differed with the dependent current source. The dependent current source, how it is converted into dependent voltage source. The same formula once again here we are using, that is Vs is equal Is into R. Here already we know the Is value, dependent current source value and its internal resistance. Product of this dependent current source value Is and its internal resistance R, then we may get a dependent voltage source value, that is Vs. This is the way how we can convert that, and shifting of voltage source into current source and current source into voltage source, either for dependent sources or for independent sources. Let us look at some problems on the same concept. Let us consider a circuit where they are given that an independent voltage source value 120 volts and its internal resistance of 6 ohms. So here we are going to convert its equivalent current source and its internal resistance. So equivalent current source value, how to find out the equivalent current source value? I is equal V by R. Here what is V? The V here it is 120 and its internal resistance is 6 ones 6 twos. So the current I can become as 20 amperes. Therefore the value of the current source Is value here it is 20 amperes, and the internal resistance of voltage source, whatever it is connected in series, now here we are connected in parallel across it. This is the way how we can convert that the given voltage source into current source, like from figure A to figure B. In similar manner, if you see that one more problem what they given here. So they given current source, they given the current source value 40 amperes and its internal resistance they given 0.80 ohms. I want its equivalent voltage source value. Its equivalent voltage source value means we know the formula V is equal I into R. What is I here? 40 amperes. 40 amperes into its internal resistance 0.8. 40 into 0.8, it becomes 32. It becomes 32 volts. Therefore 32 volts is the voltage source. But how to express the polarities? How to express the polarities means however the current is going in current source, that is downward side. In similar manner here also we have to send the current in anti-clockwise or in the downward side. So we can take that plus polarity at downside and minus polarity at upside. And whatever that internal resistance of the current source, here it is in parallel, here we can convert, here we can connect it is in series with the voltage source. This is the way how we can convert the given voltage source into current source and its vice versa and its shifting. Thank you.